How's the new year? How the commitments you made on January 1st for the new you that would emerge in 2018, how are you doing? Pretty good? Not so good? Yeah. We live in an age of perfection where we have to optimize ourselves, and I just wanted to make sure you were reaching for the very best. A woman in a New Yorker magazine said we are perfecting ourselves to death. There's a YouTube channel you can go to that can tell you how to do everything better than you're doing it right now. And it's one thing like to learn 3 or 4 things I can improve, but to know there are like 5,000 things I can improve, it's just absolutely maddening. It's like, can you ever relax? Can you ever just be you? It's like you have to believe you're inadequate all the time so that it then makes sense to start an improvement project. Well, that means you just never improve. It's just absolutely exhausting. There were 2 guys who did a study, and they made their goal that they would take their life and break it into 12 compartments, and every month they would become better at something. Every month they would do yoga or meditation or a liquid diet to cleanse their system from New Year's, or learn how to do their taxes or how to do accounting, or try stimulating their prostate. You don't want to know why. So it was just like they spent a year, and at the end of the year, one of the guys said that his wife was expecting a child, and he had spent so much time in perfecting himself that he and his wife now had no relationship at all. What you try to perfect, what you try to make better, can make you blind to other parts of life. That's kind of what Galatians is all about. So I have been trying to understand Galatians, understand what it is that Paul, the author of Galatians, is saying. I know that it's Martin Luther's favorite book. It's Jason Michelli's favorite book. I've been trying to understand it. I don't quite get it. I don't quite grasp it. I've been working on it for a month, reading lots of different commentaries, reading the book over and over. So I have like some things I've noticed about it. But it doesn't mean it's the last word on the book of Galatians. You can wait till Jason does his next sermon, and he'll give you the last word on it. Mine will just be some things I've noticed about the book. And I'm going to do them kind of fast, but if there's some part that I do like, I don't have any idea what you're talking about, just raise your hand and say, I don't know what you're talking about, and I'll try. I'll try. It's a 7-page book you can read in 10 minutes. It is this magnificent, concentrated version of what Christianity is all about. So its words are like pithy and powerful, but not explained, and so it's like you've read something really important, but you're not sure what its implications are. So I want to kind of set up for you what was going on in Paul writing the letter, and the things I noticed about the letter. Are you okay? Is that like, I don't know if this is a sermon, I don't know what this is, but it's like you and I talking, the Word of God's in the middle, and then God's going to do something magnificent, and that's what really matters, right? It's like the words aren't quite as important as what God's going to do among us. Churches can be like a fantastic place. Anybody ever experienced that? Like church is one of the funnest places you've ever been. You have like the best friends you've ever met. There is a sense of peace that happens when you walk through into the sanctuary. There's a sense of confidence that you can offer a prayer here and it gets heard, not because you're good enough for the prayers to be heard, but because God's a God of grace and mercy who wants to hear your prayer. That you're in a place that welcomes you, that loves you, that supports you, that accepts you. That you can have depth of friendship here like you can find in almost no other place that will last you for the rest of your life. There's a sense of assurance that comes from being in the church, that you know that it isn't that you were seeking God, but that God was seeking you. And when you come here again, it's like you found ground zero. You found a place to reset your life. You found what can be at its core. That's what Paul found too. And what was happening in these churches that he started, his home base is a city called Antioch, which is the 3rd largest Roman city in the Roman Empire. He is at Antioch, a Greek church that he established, a Gentile church that he established. And he had used it as his base of operations to start other churches. So that experience that we love in church, Paul had in his life, and he had it at Antioch, and he wanted to spread it to these other Gentile communities so they would have it too. That was his whole purpose. How do I take this word and give it to other people? Well, the Gentile churches he started in the community called Galatia, where were multiple satellites he started. He got word when he went back to Antioch years later that the people participating in the Gentile churches were turning them into synagogues instead of churches. They were like hanging out pictures of Jesus as the quintessential Jew, and that they could become a quintessential Jew too if they just practiced the law like Jesus did. So they called themselves churches, but they really were wanting to become like a synagogue, filled with following the law, following the rules, being perfect. Without YouTube videos, they had the law that would be just as good, and they themselves too could one day be perfect like Jesus. So when Paul got word that that's what they were doing, he was furious. It wasn't that he was mad at synagogues for being synagogues, but he hated that what the church had, it had squandered. It no longer valued. It didn't appreciate, didn't live in the midst of all of its grace, but instead had surrendered it to this doing everything the right way thing. And so he wrote the letter to the Galatians. So I want you to know what he was up against. The people in Galatia had started the church, listened to Paul, and said, yes, this is great. And then the church in Jerusalem, that this is a church that is attended. You know how you can have a church that's attended by all the senators and all the Congress people, all the people that have a lot of money, all the important people? A church like that? Well, that's the church in Jerusalem. All of the disciples of Jesus, they go to that church. They sit in those pews. They preach the sermons. They have sent a delegation. The Jerusalem church, with all of the apostles, have sent a delegation to the Galatian church. And the purpose of the delegation is to set them right, because Paul, they said, was wrong. That would be intimidating for me, to have that group show up. You know, when somebody... Have you ever gone to a senator's office or congressional person's office and they have a brag wall of all the people they've met and all the things that they've done and all the things they've accomplished? And it kind of makes you know that you just ought to shut up and listen. At least when I go. I don't have much to say. I have to listen. Larry Nesser, Dr. Larry Nesser, who was a doctor to gymnasts in the Olympic movement, to girl gymnasts in the Olympic movement, has admitted to abusing them over a 30-year period, where he used his authority to pleasure himself on little girls' bodies and psyches. And if you went into his office at Michigan State, or you went to his office when he was working in his home or in his own private practice, you would see on the wall the picture of all the Olympic gymnasts he had coached. He had been a doctor to. Their pictures, their parents' pictures, replicas of the gold medals that they had won. And it was on every wall. So when you walked into the place, you knew you just had to shut up and do whatever he said. That he had the authority. And who were you? When one of the 120 girls who was at the hearing to say what it cost them for what he did, one of them said, if one adult had listened to the voice of a little girl, 30 years of tragedies would have been avoided. 120 women have found their voice, have stood up to this authority to tell the truth about what happened. Not so that they themselves can find justice or revenge, but so that other women will stand up and the country as a whole, the world as a whole, will know to listen. That whatever is telling you not to pay attention will be replaced by something that hears a call in that voice. I'm like you, I applaud their courage, and I'm shamed by their suffering. Paul was being told to shut up, to be quiet, that there were authorities who knew better than him, and he refused. He refused. What they wanted the church to become was a place that believed the law of Moses was the best guess on how to become acceptable to God. You get life right, and God accepts you. Paul's gospel is that you don't have to get it right to receive the grace of God. As a matter of fact, whoever you are, you're never going to get it right enough. You getting it right or wrong isn't the point. The point is that Jesus Christ is coming for you. The grace the mercy, the love, the healing, the power, the divine presence, that thing that tells you you nailed it, you got it right, whatever it is you're trying to accomplish, I'm there. That moment has come in Jesus Christ for you. And you can reset anywhere, anytime to that grace. That's what he wanted to say. You don't have to be something else. You don't have to prove something else. You don't have to make God say, well done, good and faithful servant, because he already said it to Jesus Christ, and that's the one you're following. So you get to bask in the glory of Christ's approval by God. I'm not worth that. Of course not. Your being worthy or not isn't the point. God's grace to us is the point. You know, if you're Methodist, that the whole gospel comes down to covered dish dinners, right? We love to eat together. We love to eat at church. We love to eat at home. We're really good about food. So where all this works out, where all this comes together for Paul is at a meal. So in Antioch, in his home church, a guy named Peter, one of the original disciples, shows up at Antioch with Paul, and they eat together. They eat together. Jews and Gentiles. Paul's a Jew. You know about Paul, right? Make sure I want you. Paul was born a Jew. He loves Jews. He was born a Jew. He became a Pharisee, which is like the Jew of the Jews. And then he became the Pharisee of the Pharisees. He joined what we think N.T. Wright says is a Shamat cult inside of the Pharisee party. It takes its life animation from a story in the book of Numbers about a man who killed a Jew for collaborating with a Moabite. It takes its vibe from Elijah the prophet, who slew 400 prophets of Baal in the name of keeping Judaism pure. So this is a group of Pharisees who took the law into their own hands. They practiced violence. They practiced murder and disruption in the name of their religion being pure. We would call him a religious terrorist today. That's the Apostle Paul when he was called Saul. He lived his life with zeal. He would get court orders to disrupt Christians' lives, to have their property taken away from them. He would have them arrested. He would break up families. He would stand by while they were being murdered. That's how he served God. And what Paul gets, what he knows happened, is that God came in Jesus Christ, and Paul, trying to do everything right, blinded him so he couldn't see it. The very thing that was supposed to make him able to serve God made him blind to what God was doing in the world. Do you all get that? The very thing you think is going to help you is the thing that destroys you. The thing that you give all of your time to stops you from giving your time to what really matters. So Paul gets converted. He finds out that this Jesus Christ is filled with grace. And he doesn't have to get to that grace by doing anything first. It just comes to him. So he tells that story to all of the Gentiles, and they embrace that grace. When Peter is sitting and having dinner with all of the Gentiles and Paul, everything was great. Then some of these people from the Jerusalem church come to also have dinner, and Peter refuses to sit with the Gentiles, but instead only sits with his Jewish friends. Because he says the Gentiles are unclean. And Paul says Jesus Christ makes them clean. So he refuses to let go. He stands up to Peter. He stands up to all of those people that have authority and says the grace of God is for everybody, and we're not going to surrender for a moment to thinking the grace only belongs to a few or that you have to earn it. I applaud his incredible courage. Like the courage of last Sunday, 80 miles south of Los Angeles, a 17-year-old girl who had been plotting this for 2 years before dawn climbed through a window in her bedroom. She took with her a sibling, a sister. But the sister, once outside, was so frightened by the punishment she thought she would endure if her parents discovered she wasn't in the house that she ran back into the house through the window. The one that got out had with her a cell phone, a deactivated cell phone, but the federal government requires that a deactivated phone can still dial 911. She had on the phone pictures of the conditions in which she and her siblings had been living for at least 4 years. A condition in which the children were allowed to bathe once a year. If, when they washed their hands, the water got above their wrist, they were severely punished. They were tied to their beds by ropes, and when one of them got away, they replaced the ropes with chains. They were fed at most once a day. The 17-year-old who escaped, when she called the police believed she was 10 because of her malnutrition. There was a 29-year-old sibling also chained to a bed who was 82 pounds. The 13 siblings who lived in the house were being cared for not by a kidnapper or a terrorist, but by their parents. So knowing what you and I know about being a hostage, about the mental cruelty of abuse, of how hard it is to get out of the world that they create for you, I can't imagine her courage, knowing what she would face if she was captured. I can't imagine her courage to dial 911, to talk to the police, to show them the pictures, and to go back into the house and confront her parents. I can't imagine. How about you? It's a horrific, courageous story. I tell you that simply to say that the story of Paul's courage, the nature of the gospel, to stand for all people being equal in the eyes of God, that God shows no partiality to any race, to any creed, to any culture, to courageously speak the truth of Jesus Christ as the beginning point of a new creation, that in Jesus Christ all the grace we have ever wanted is possible. We wouldn't be here today without that gospel that's found in the book of Galatians. I offer to you in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.